Here we are live at MedTech in Toronto, not Mars yet, but we got Don here with us. We're so excited to have you, and Randy, my co-host.
Oh, so Don, tell us about yourself. Where do you work? What do you do? Tell our audience your story.
Perfect, Randy. Well, thanks for putting this together. Good to be here. My name is Don Bobo. I work for Edwards Lifesciences, and I'm a corporate vice president responsible for strategy, corporate development, and a number of our new initiatives. Edwards is a very cool company, 65 plus years old, very focused in cardiovascular innovation. And that's what's kept the company exciting for me. And I'm an engineer by training. I've been in the business since college, although that wasn't my original plan, but life often delivers that. And it's just been super rewarding to be at Edwards and to see so many innovations come through for patients.
That's great. So next year's your 30th anniversary at Edwards.
Who's counting?
Yeah, I'm amazed. I feel ashamed with all the jobs I've had compared to that. That's terrific. So 2 questions. Well, actually, first one, this one is on the agenda, but you're an AdvaMed board member. You've been in the industry 30 years. How has AdvaMed and this conference changed in that time?
Wow, they've come a long way. I'm thinking this year we probably have 4,000 plus people at this conference. I'm going to guess the first one in DC had 400. So it's really hit stride, and it becomes a conference that's valuable for multiple stakeholders, companies, people just entering the industries, stakeholders, FDA, CMS, and that combination really makes this a super interesting and exciting conference.
Excellent. So your audience, a lot of healthcare people, but they all have family members with cardiac issues. I certainly do. What's something that's come out of Edwards in the last 12 months that you could tell somebody as a patient or a family member impacts them? What's really interesting that's come out this year?
Well, probably one of our most exciting innovations is a transcatheter way to replace a tricuspid valve. It's often called the forgotten valve because there's never been a way to treat this disease. Now we're able to routinely go in and repair or replace a tricuspid valve. And this is something we've recently launched in the last year, and we think it's going to be very meaningful for many, many patients that right now there's no way to treat the disease and they end up just parked on medication. So super exciting.
So you got surgeons, cardiac surgeons and cardiologists saying, I've never had a way to do this, and now suddenly there's something available to us.
Now there's a way to do this for the majority of patients.
Wow. So they calling their backlog of patients saying, hey, come back in?
That's a great question. Part of what happens in healthcare when there's not an answer is they send you home on meds and they forget about doing anything because there's nothing to do. So it's actually harder than that because a lot of these patients are parked and you need to go rediscover them, bring them in and get them moving on a brand new pathway for therapy. So that's part of where our teams spend their time as well.
I'd almost want to spend the whole interview on that, but we're gonna cover some other stuff. We'll get that another time. Also, just one last question. I mean, worked at one place your whole career. What makes it special? What differentiates it? What keeps somebody there for 30 years?
30 years is not quite my whole career. I was with a couple of other companies, but Edwards has been unique for a couple of reasons. One, it just had a constant bias to innovate. Think about what else could we be doing to really bend the curve for these patients suffering from cardiovascular disease. And even with some successes we've had and even failures, we haven't really lost that main focus of our strategy. How do we innovate in a way that really moves the needle for patients? And then secondly, I've had the gift of doing a lot of different things at Edwards. So from a development standpoint and having a chance to develop and exercise new muscles beyond engineering, I've had that opportunity as well. So those are the 2 reasons why I'm still at Edwards.
So same company, but different jobs every couple of years, almost totally new challenge.
I'd say same name, but it's also a different company. We've seen the company go from $1 billion in sales to 5 plus. We've seen us go from a more diversified strategy to a company very focused on structural heart disease. So same name, the company's evolved, and I've had the gift of evolving with the company.
Cool. So
Yeah, so you're here. We're glad you are joining us, sharing with us. What do you see like some of the exciting things at this conference that you want to be sitting at, listening to as you're here?
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. One, we all know there's a constant move for digital and AI continuing to transform how we find disease, how we diagnose disease, and how we treat disease. It's been fun to see this year. There's even more of that. Now, it's not so simple. There's a lot of pieces to it. There are regulators. There's how do you pay for it? How do you integrate it? But I'm very excited because I see a lot of that moving into the mainstream that's going to have a meaningful impact on patients.
So do you see like, Mark Andreessen in his famous Wall Street Journal article 13 years ago said, in the future, every company will be a software company. Do you feel like every year Edwards' software is more and more of a core competency within the organization?
Not yet, or if you measure it in small increments, yes, a little more. We actually just sold our critical care business. They were much more of the software business. So now we're more focused on structural heart. But we have a couple of very important initiatives that are largely software-driven, data-driven. And it's not a majority, but it's a significant initiative, quite frankly, that teaches us about the chaos of patients getting diagnosed and getting care. And it makes us better partners with physicians and other stakeholders to deliver that care.
And it teaches you as a result of designing that software and doing the requirements, or seeing the data that comes out of it gives you insights?
The latter. I think the data that comes out of it, quite frankly, makes every day a school day.
Yeah.
You see this data, you see how patients are moving, you see where they're being misdirected, where they're properly directed, and you just end up coming off of that a much better partner with hospitals and physicians.
Awesome.
So, one more thing. So I've actually been hoping to get a hold of an executive in Edwards for an interview for a couple of years on this one, because this is something that you are all very well known for doing an amazing job of among a fairly small group of people. But I'm hoping we can get a little insight in it, which is that when you're developing a medical device, be it a startup or an established firm, you essentially have 4 gauntlets of stakeholders, all of whom want a lot of data. First of all, you have your investors, right, either internally or externally. You have your regulators, then you have your payers, and then you have the providers and the patients. And there seems to be an interesting Venn diagram where there's overlaps between a lot of what they want, but they're not the same thing. And it almost becomes this challenge as we look at it, as like, how many pins can you knock down with the bowling ball at once? So you're not doing an individual study for each person at each time. You guys have a reputation, particularly with TAVR, of having just nailed this, of getting down this sort of clinical trial and evidence pipeline to the point where, I don't know the exact numbers, but the numbers I heard thrown out were, you could get for a new indication on TAVR CMS or FDA in 3 months and a couple more weeks for CMS or something. I'm sure the numbers aren't right, but tell us about that, because that's an amazing thing.
So you're on an interesting point. This multi-stakeholder reality is something that recently companies have kind of started to focus on. I go back to when we spun out of Baxter Healthcare in 2000. We put together a credo for the company that actually in that credo elevates our actions benefiting multiple stakeholders. And you ask the right question, how do you do that, right? Because at some point they're at odds. And one of the things we've learned and has now become ensconced in our DNA is that if you put yourself in the patient's shoes, it's actually the best way to thread the needle through investors, regulators, payers, physicians, and hospitals. And so at Edwards, one of the things we have done better and better each year, but is to have a very clear, intentional, articulate, patient-focused innovation strategy. So when we make decisions, we say, I understand what the investors think, FDA, CMS, management, engineers, but if you're the patient, what decision would you want to be made? And what we found is that patient focus is an amazing third rail that unifies just about every stakeholder. Because if at the end of the day you delight a patient, we do fine. The shareholders see that. FDA feels that motivation, CMS. And so this is something that we constantly bring ourselves and our teams back to, which has been super helpful in that point.
Candidly, I'm almost getting like a little bit clamped, because it's so rare in healthcare in this country to hear somebody say, if you do right by the patient, it's actually great business, unfortunately. So that's really exciting to hear.
We believe that.
Awesome. Terrific. Well, thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Have a great conference.
All right.